Hey, it's Enigma Hood. I wanted to talk more about animal testing. I feel like that's something I really have to go into even further. I briefly mentioned it in my previous video about animal rights. I only touched on it a little bit in that video because I was running out of time, but it's a very important issue. In fact, I would say it's probably the most barbaric form of animal cruelty that we have today. So this really needs to be addressed. I am against animal testing in any way, shape, or form. I got some personal messages from a user, one of my subscribers actually, jonsonbrown, and you know, I felt like I should properly address what he's saying and let the YouTube community decide for themselves who they agree with. But anyway, here's what he said about animal rights. While I share your opinion that animals should not be hunted for sport, I wholeheartedly disagree with your opinion that animals should not be used for medical testing. I also vehemently oppose extremist and terrorist groups like PETA. Perhaps Ane would agree. If you have a few minutes to spare, watch Penn and Teller's episode on PETA and animal rights. I'd be interested in your assessment of their conclusions. Okay, he opposes hunting for sport, but is in favor for animal testing because of the benefits that can be derived from testing drugs and chemicals on animals for the benefit of human beings. Well, I oppose that. I oppose that completely because while the goal is noble, it's noble, the means to attain that goal are unacceptable. It is way too barbaric, it is way too cruel to animals for them to suffer for our own benefit, especially given the fact that inherently you have to make them suffer painfully. I've seen the videos. It's not a pleasant thing to see because millions of animals are killed every year for these animal tests, and you know, it seems like they're not really getting that good information from these tests either. I could be mistaken. Some of the tests probably do derive some good information. However, I feel like there have to be alternatives to obtaining this information. Okay, now he sent me another one, which I basically stated this. Okay, and I also stated that I don't think PETA is an extremist or terrorist group. It's an animal rights group. Now, it's true that they have been criticized for being extremist and being terrorists and things like that, but I support any animal rights group because we need more animal rights groups. We need more people that are aware of the suffering and cruelty that is done towards animals, and people should not stand for that. They shouldn't stand for that. That is something worth fighting for. Okay? So, anyway, he responds by saying this. Damn, I totally misjudged you. I thought you were a rational person. Did you even watch the video I suggested? If it were not for animal testing, millions of human lives would not be saved. You aren't honestly one of those people who believe that animals' lives are as valuable as humans, are you? PETA is a cult. Okay. Let's see. Well, in terms of, are human lives more or less important than animal lives? Well, you know, it depends on the human, and it depends on the animal, doesn't it? I already talked about where I draw the line in my previous video. We all have a different line that we draw. And in my opinion, there are some animal lives that are more important than some human lives. If it was between something like a blue whale and some guy that I never met in my life, I'm gonna say that the blue whale's life is more important simply because blue whales are a rare species. They are on the verge of extinction. Its life is more precious than a human life. There are over 6 billion people on this planet. What do I care about some random guy that I never met? You know, unfortunately, if I have to quantify it like that, then I will quantify it like that. The blue whale's life is actually more important simply because it's on the verge of extinction. Therefore, its life is more precious. I have to say it like that. You know, I have to say the blunt truth like that. On the other hand, there's some humans who I really have a negative value for their life. People like Shoko Asahara. Okay, I talked about him before. Marshall Applewhite's dead, but let's say Charles Manson. Okay, his life, the value of his life is negative. But okay, let's take somebody that I do know. In that case, someone like, I don't know, my father or my mother, their life would be more important to me than a dog. Okay, just because there's that bond between us that all people would have. And on the other hand, this guy himself, and let me go on to his next email. He sent me another one. Okay, here's what he said. Personally, I believe my dog's life is more valuable to me than any human that I don't know. And most humans that I do know, if I had to choose between my dog's life and my uncle's life, the uncle would bite the dust. See, right there, that shows that, to him even, his dog's life is very precious to him. So it's not a matter of saying human life is more important than a wild animal's life. Some wild animals are actually more important to us than human beings. It's just, we make the call. There is no universal law that says we have to choose one or the other. It's up to the individual to say whether or not they feel that this animal's life is more important than a human's life, or this human's life is more important than an animal's life. Okay, let's move on. And he goes on to say, but I do not oppose testing on animals that I don't know, for the benefit of saving humans. PETA is an animal rights group, or so they say. They oppose euthanasia of animals, but practice it themselves. Yeah, they do. I know that. Or at least they did. They oppose animal testing, but their vice president at the time of the video suggested I suggested you watch uses insulin to preserve her own life. What the hell? That didn't make any sense. They oppose animal testing, but their vice president at the time of the video I suggested you watch uses insulin to preserve... He didn't put commas in the right place. Basically what he's saying is the vice president of PETA uses insulin to preserve her own life. Okay. There's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Like I said before, there's nothing wrong with the goals of animal testing. They are benevolent in principle. Okay? The goals of animal testing are benevolent. The means of obtaining the goals are cruel and unusual, and that's what we should oppose. Now, is it hypocritical for someone to oppose animal testing but to use drugs that were tested on animals? It's not hypocritical, and here's my rationale, or my argument. During World War II, the Nazis experimented on humans. These were called Nazi human experimentations. And one of the famous experiments was they subjected innocent people who did nothing wrong, Jewish people, to extremely cold temperatures, dunking them into tanks of ice water for up to 5 hours. Placed prisoners naked in the open for several hours with temperatures below freezing. And the experiments assessed different ways of rewarming survivors. So these were techniques. The reason why they were doing this was to simulate conditions suffered on the Eastern Front. Okay, and preparing for the cold weather. And they got actually very useful information for treating hypothermia. Okay, and to this day, our best data on hypothermia and how to treat hypothermia is from these Nazi human experimentations. So, is it hypocritical for someone to condemn Nazi human experimentations, think it's wrong and unethical, but to use the treatments for hypothermia? It's not hypocritical. Not at all. We have the good data. We have this useful information. There's nothing wrong with using it. What was wrong was obtaining the information. There should have been some other way. They didn't have to do it like that. However, since we have this information, let's put it to good use.